So you just went through weeks, maybe even months of searching for the perfect person for whatever role that you're hiring for, and you think the work's over, but that's where most entrepreneurs go wrong, and that's where a lot of my clients go wrong and people that watch all of my content. What's really even more important than the hiring process and screening people and interviewing them, it's really what happens after you hire them, especially within the first 30 days. And this is where most entrepreneurs go wrong. A lot of people think that they're done hiring and the hard part's over, but that's completely wrong. This is where the hard part really starts. And because most people don't know what I'm about to break down in this video, they have a revolving door of talent within their business. And as a result, they have a really hard time scaling their business. But it doesn't have to be that way. It's actually much more simple than many people make it out to be. The reason why they don't succeed with hiring and scaling their business is mainly because they have a lack of clarity about how to do that and how to set their team up for success, especially new hires. And then as a result, the new hires have a lack of clarity as well. So in this video, I'm going to break down exactly what I've personally done to build 3 multiple 7-figure businesses purely by hiring virtual assistants in other countries. I have a 7-pillar framework that I'm going to break down for you in a moment that's going to set you and your new hire up for success and give you a dramatically different result than you're getting right now. So with that being said, let's go ahead and dive into the video. So the first pillar is really all about onboarding. The first 3 to 4 days of a new hire coming into your company are absolutely critical because they're judging you and you're really setting the stage for what they can expect working with you moving forward. If you're scattered, if you're unprepared, if you don't nip little bad behaviors or red flags in the bud immediately, they're gonna start to view you in such a way that maybe they can push your boundaries or even take advantage of you, or they're just gonna lose confidence in you and the leader that you're the person that they can really rely on to make more money, progress their career, and learn and really develop more. So if you start off on the wrong foot, you're really gonna have to be playing catch up for months and months. And what'll probably inevitably happen is that the person's gonna quit because they're not gonna see your company and their role as really being the best potential option for them in the long run. One thing I'm going to get into at the end of this video, which is the most important part of this entire framework, is related to the fact that people care about one thing and one thing only, and it's themselves. They don't really care about you. They don't really care about your business. Maybe they will down the road, but initially really what they're thinking coming into the role is, what's in it for me? What can I get out of this? And that's okay. And it's, some people might get a little salty about that and they don't like to acknowledge the fact that all human beings are selfish, but it's really just better for you. And you're going to have a higher likelihood of being successful if you can just acknowledge this as reality and act accordingly. So going into the first pillar here, structured onboarding. So this is really just going to be all about setting you up for success and your new hire up for success in the long run. So obviously the first thing you're going to need to do is give them all their tech and tools. So what I recommend is just put together a Google Doc ahead of time with a checklist of different softwares they're gonna have to log into, different permissions that you'll need to set up within those softwares, and then maybe some training videos associated with those softwares as well. And then have all of that organized so that they can hit the ground running as soon as they start working for you. You don't wanna spend a couple of days or even a week losing momentum, scrambling, trying to find like all the different softwares and setting up logins, stuff like that. So ideally get your ducks in a row ahead of time. That one should be pretty obvious, but the part that most people miss is they're just very unorganized. All right, so the next thing you want to do is you want to do a structured team welcome. So maybe get them on a meeting with your team. This obviously applies more to a smaller team or a smaller business, but you want to get them to know everybody. You want everybody to get to know them. You want to introduce them and also set expectations to your team in front of everybody about how this person's going to be interacting with them, what their role is, how they're going to be working together, things like that. Essentially, just do some icebreakers so that they can start to get to know everybody and they can get a little bit more meshed into your company on a social basis. Okay, next up, you want to do some cultural immersion. So the person that you're hiring, if you're hiring abroad in other countries, probably comes from a different culture than you. And depending on who else you've already hired, they might come from from a different culture from those people as well. So the thing is with cultures, and if you haven't traveled a lot or really been around people from other cultures, is that one thing that's completely normal and unspoken in one culture is not the case in another. And people have different ways of doing things and different things that are considered to be normal, I guess you would say. And this also applies within your company and other companies. And more than likely, unless you're hiring someone who literally just got their first job with you, this person has worked in other companies, and those companies had other cultures that were different than yours. So things that were normal in their old workplace and were accepted, which sometimes are not going to be acceptable to you depending on your standards, and hopefully they're high, are going to be different than what's considered to be normal and acceptable within your company. So it's really good to help them understand what to expect from your company culture, what that's going to look like on a day-to-day basis, so that you don't run into issues over the first couple of weeks or even months with them like trying to figure things out and not really doing things the way that you want. You essentially want to show them all the unwritten rules. This is another good thing to put into a Google document. You can go and chat with AI if you want beforehand and brainstorm and help it really draft this document for you. But I think it's a good idea to show them the unwritten rules. How do you communicate? How do you work together? Do you send memes, and are you kind of silly? Who's who in the company? Stuff like that. Like, just really go above and beyond to set them up for success from a cultural standpoint. Okay, so that one's pretty basic, but most people will not do that at all, and they're gonna come in very scattered. I think this first pillar is very underrated. It doesn't seem like it's really gonna make you any money in the short term, which it's not, but in the long run, in terms of retention and getting this person up to speed and really integrated within your company, I guarantee you end up making you money from that alone. So let's go into number 2 here. So number 2 ties into number 1. The next thing you're going to do is you're going to need to set crystal clear expectations. A lot of people do not do this, probably like 90% plus of business owners. Really only the experienced operators, in my opinion, are really good at being crystal clear. And that's because they weren't clear in the past, and then they paid the price. They had a lot of unsuccessful hires and a lot of unproductive people and turnover, etc. So over time, as you start to experience that pain, you're going to realize that the more crystal clear you are, the better. Some people don't do this because it requires more work. You've got to go and actually document your expectations and discuss them, and requires brain power, and you've got to carve it out. But guess what? You're a business owner and you don't have a freaking choice, so go ahead and do it, please. So this really goes beyond the job description. The job description is more high level. It's going to give just a summary of what they're going to be doing, but this is where you really need to tell them how to achieve excellence within your company, and also telling them that you expect excellence, and this is not a place for people to show up and just coast and do the bare minimum. So the first thing you want to do, talk about some of your values. Okay, so like in my company, I've copied Ray Dalio. If you haven't read his book Principles, you should go read that. But there's 2 principles in his workplace that he instilled. One is radical honesty and one is radical transparency. A lot of people cannot take that. They will not like those things and they will quit, and they're just not going to be a cultural fit. But if you explain why you operate that way, then you can usually get a greater percentage of people on board, and they'll be more likely to actually be open to operating that way. So I'll go over some things like that literally from day one, their first day of work, telling them about our values. And, this really ties back to the cultural immersion as well, and the culture that you're trying to build in your company. If you're not thinking about culture in your company right now, you're probably going to run into a lot of issues down the road. I'm assuming you're not doing that because you're small and you're scrappy and you haven't hired that many people and you haven't seen how things can break down at scale. I guarantee you, once you get to maybe even 5 to 6 or 7 people, you're going to start to feel it. And then if you get up to 20 to 30 people and you have not aggressively attacked your culture, you're going to start having some issues. So start thinking about these things right now if you're not already. The next thing you want to do is talk about communication cadence. So this could be internally and it could also be externally. So for example, we always aim to respond to clients within 1 hour max, and we really move quickly, and we want to over communicate things like expectations, and just when we're dealing with clients in general, because we want them to know that they're heard and they feel like they're understood and they know that we're really invested in our success with them. And then it could also be things like internal communication. For example, at the end of the day, you're going to send your end of day report in Slack, things like that. So start to set expectations on how you are expecting them to communicate both internally within the company and externally with clients. Okay, next up, you're going to go over what is called the definition of done. So what does a good job actually look like? Because like I was saying before, maybe they come from a company where the standards weren't as high. So in this particular part of setting expectations, you really want to start talking about what does A+ work look like versus maybe B or B- work, and try to make it as crystal clear as possible and be very descriptive and detailed so that this person can envision what you're trying to articulate. Okay, next up, number 3 here, we got going over the role, the responsibilities, and the 30-day win. So this is where you're gonna get even more granular about their role and what they're responsible for and really owning within your company. And then you're gonna set them up for some kind of win within the first 30 days to really get that positive momentum. And like I said, you want to get granular here, okay? So while you're interviewing them and they're reading the job description, all that stuff, they're going to have a high level overview of what they're going to be doing in the role, but this is where you're going to get more detailed and really get into the weeds. Okay, next up, you need to create scorecards. People need to know how they're performing. Your B and C players don't really want to know how they're performing because they're secretly hoping that you're not tracking them so they can just kind of exist within the company and do the bare minimum. Those people eventually need to be fired, most likely. The A players, the people that are competitive, that want to improve, that want to make an impact, these people are actively seeking out the opportunity to receive feedback. So you need to put together scorecards to give them basically a grade on how they're performing versus KPIs, which we're going to get into shortly. And then next up, the first 30-day win, you want to give them some kind of roadmap for the first month of working with you. Maybe even it's a specific project that they're expected to complete, and you want to go over that with them and map that out, again, just like everything else, with very crystal clear expectations. Clarity is literally like the biggest thing most of people are lacking. And then you want to start working towards that with them. All right, that being said, let's go into number 4. So we need to have trackable KPIs, and then also a single source of truth. Most people are absolutely terrible at this because they don't know how to actually track the KPIs. And then also, if you don't have any kind of system set up to do it, it is a giant pain in the ass. But I'm going to give you some tips right now so that you can actually do this successfully. And when you do it successfully, it's the biggest game changer ever, because they know how they're doing, you know how they're doing. No one has to go and try and get data and figure it out. Everybody just knows, and it's very clear, and there's no arguing. You just have an objective single source of truth. So I'll get into that in 2 seconds, but that's really going to be some dashboards that you need to set up. If you don't do that, you're probably screwed. So for KPIs, you're going to have leading and lagging indicators. A lagging indicator is something that hasn't really kicked in yet or happened yet. For example, revenue, right? Like you're not going to see the end result of what they're doing until later on. So it's technically lagging, but a leading indicator is something like, what was their close rate on the sales call? Or how many proposals do they send out? Something like that you can track in real time. So figure out, based on what the role is and what success looks like, what are some actual trackable KPIs realistically that are leading and lagging, and then you need to set that up, and that's going to tie into their scorecard. And then the next thing you need to do is you need to create some freaking dashboards to track the KPIs. Otherwise, it's just not going to get done. There's too much stuff going on day to day. You're busy, you're stressed, you got a lot of stuff going on. You need to find some automated ways to track the data in the form of KPIs and roll it up into a dashboard so that you have this single source of truth so that no one is confused about how anyone's doing or the company's performing. You can use AI to do this, okay? So I built an amazing dashboard that someone quoted me like 50K to build. It initially started off at like 20 to 30K in 2 months of work. And then I expanded the scope, and then it became like easily 50K in 4 to 6 months of work. Pretty crazy. So I actually built this in a tool called Manus AI, and I built the initial version in like 3 days of working on it part-time. And like I said, a developer quoted me 20 to 30K in 2 to 3 months of work. And I did it in 3 days, and I looked at my credits, and I think it cost me like $15. This is amazing because it's fully customizable, and you can actually connect it to different APIs. So if you're working out of softwares, which obviously you are, you can pull in the data through an API and populate the dashboard. That way it doesn't even have to be done manually. So highly recommend doing this. Just build custom dashboards. It's so easy with AI. It doesn't cost any money. Okay, next up, number 5, the feedback loop. So trackable KPIs and dashboards are useless if you're not actually doing anything with them. Yes, they are helpful to see how people are performing and they can look at them, but the goal is to have constant and never-ending improvement, and you need a feedback loop. What I mean by this is you need a structured system to give feedback. So one thing you definitely want to do is you need to set up some kind of weekly check-in to go and review what they're stuck on, what they need help with, why they're performing the way they are, any training they need, stuff like that. And you want to remove all of the obstacles and roadblocks so that there's no excuse to not be crushing it. The next thing you want to do is what I was saying before with the values, radical honesty and radical transparency. You need to train people on why you're going to be incredibly direct and blunt with them and how it's in their best interest. Remember, the only thing people care about is themselves. Otherwise, most people will get defensive and they won't buy into it, and you're probably going to piss them off and it's going to backfire. So you need to do some training specifically on why this is going to help both of you, and really more so them, so that you can be very direct with them and transparent so that you can get your point across a lot faster. Again, go read Ray Dalio's book, Principles. He's a billionaire. He's one of the richest people in the world. Ran a huge hedge fund. Obviously, the guy knows what he's doing when it comes to building a successful organization, so go check that out. Okay, the next thing you can do is genuinely give I don't know if I can say that on YouTube, so I'm just gonna, you get the point. If you actually care about the person and their success, not only is that really going to show and they're going to see it because you can't fake it, but it's going to make you a much better coach, a much better leader. They're going to appreciate it. You guys will have a better relationship. Things are just going to be more successful. So this is just like an underlying frame, a mental frame that you should have at all times about everybody on your team, because it's really going to show, because like I said, you can't fake it. And the next thing you need to do is you need to do all of this very consistently. If you do it once in a while and then you forget and you slack off, then the feedback loop isn't going to be very strong. They're not going to get that much better, and then you're kind of wasting your time. So you got to be consistent with this, just like anything else you do in life regarding your success. Next up, continuous coaching and development. So that perfectly ties me into this. So you need to put together some kind of growth plan for them. So what kind of skills do they want? What kind of things do they need to learn? And ideally, you map it out in a 90-day structured plan. What you'll notice in general across this video is that there's 2 recurring themes that are really going to help you build a bigger company and make a lot more money. It's clarity and structure. The less clarity and the less structure you have, the more chaos and stress you're going to have, and the less success you're going to have. That can work when you're really small, and maybe if it's just you or like one other person. Once you start to grow, you absolutely need a ton of structure and clarity. The more, the better. Get granular. And if you're not good at this, which most entrepreneurs are not, because we're kind of scattered and we've got a lot of ideas and we like to move quickly, go and hire an operator who is actually good at this stuff and can work on it for you full time. That's what I've done myself in my own companies, and it's been a game changer. Okay, next up, in continuous coaching and development, invest in training and learning. So you can either do this yourself, or you can train certain leaders within your own company to train your team for you, which is what you should be doing once you reach a certain size and scale and you have enough people where you can afford to do that. But early on, you need to be the one that's really setting the standard and training everyone and coaching everyone and getting everybody up to your level. And then last but not least, in this particular pillar, you need to understand the difference between coaching and managing. So managing is really just trying to figure out what to do day to day and supporting them day to day, getting the work done. Coaching is really more so investing in them, having a growth plan, and really helping up here with their development. You need to understand the difference, and you need to invest a lot into coaching. That's that's going to pay dividends for you in the long run, whereas management is really just kind of like a near-term thing. Last but not least, let's go into number 7. This is where a lot of people completely drop the freaking ball. So let's talk about incentives, okay? Going back to the beginning of the video, people care about one thing and one thing only. Get this through your head right now and save yourself a ton of frustration. They care about themselves. While I would love to live in a world where everyone loves me for my soul and who I am, they don't, okay? They're working for me because I'm providing what they perceive to be the best opportunity that they could find at this point in their life, whether it's financially or in terms of their development or whatever the heck it might be. So they need to be incentivized to get me what I want. Otherwise, trust me, they're not gonna do it. I have dropped the ball on incentives many times throughout my own career, and I paid the price by having people that were not motivated and they were not as driven as I needed them to be. And as a result, my business kind of stagnated or grew very slowly, and it cost me a ton of money. So for those of you that are very cheap and you're like, well, I don't want to pay them more money. Well, guess what? The opportunity cost of you not paying them more money is going to cost you infinitely more money than what you're going to be paying them. Let me give you kind of a no-brainer example. And if you've done anything correctly, you know that this is incredibly true. But people even mess this up. So let's say you hire a salesperson. I had a client a couple months ago do this, and he didn't listen to me, and he ended up regretting it. So he came to us and he's like, hey, I want to hire a sales rep, but I don't want to pay him commission. And immediately I was like, dude, what are you talking about? You're just going to pay your sales rep a base salary and no commission? Why are they going to care to close anybody? Have you ever done sales before in your life? Like, don't you know that it's pretty tough, it's challenging, and it's a grind, and you've got to have some kind of motivator and reward. Otherwise, you're not going to perform. Like, it's just not going to happen unless you're literally selling the easiest thing in the world. And he was incredibly stubborn and he was cheap. So he didn't want to pay him more. And then lo and behold, he came back later on. He's like, hey, this person's not doing well. And I was like, yeah, dude, because you're not paying them any commission. They don't care. They're going to do the bare minimum. That's like the biggest no-brainer example is sales. But every person within your company needs some kind of incentive tied to their performance, which is tracked through a dashboard via different trackable KPIs. Do you see how this whole thing is blending together? So if you get this wrong, you're screwed. If you get this right, it completely unlocks everything, and it's going to be an absolute game changer without exaggeration. So like I said, you need incentives directly linked to KPIs that are trackable, and then you're going to track them through the dashboard that you're probably going to build with Manus. Otherwise, realistically, you're probably not going to build the dashboard because it's going to cost you a ton of money and a ton of time. So build the dashboard through Manus, connect it with KPIs, so whatever the heck you're working out of, and track people's performance and coach them and give feedback like I was saying before. And then also you need to understand what kind of incentives that people want. A lot of people are going to be driven by money, and that's okay, that's reality. But some people are also driven by non-monetary incentives. Maybe they're titles, maybe it's recognition, things like that. So you really got to understand what makes people tick. And then last but not least, your incentives need to be fair. So don't pay people like $1 or something stupid per deal that they close. They need to be simple. Don't have this overly complex Excel sheet with all these formulas and the structure and all this stuff that's very complicated to understand about how they're going to get paid certain amounts and when. And then make it motivating, okay? So this goes back to here. Do not be cheap, okay? I'm going to write that down because too many people are just so freaking cheap when paying their staff. Do not be cheap, okay? And this isn't because it's just the nice thing to do. It's because that's what's going to make you money, okay? I'm appealing to your selfish interest right now. If you want to scale your business and you want your team to actually give a fuck and actually work hard and be motivated just like you are, don't be cheap. Pay them what they're worth and more. Give them a really good deal. Set up very enticing incentive structures that are tied to their performance. And I guarantee you, you will see a night and day difference in how your team is performing. So there you go. These are the 7 pillars. Let me recap for you real quick so you can see how this all ties together. So structured onboarding. This is about just laying down the framework and foundation. Then you're going to set crystal clear expectations so that the person who takes a 3-hour lunch or clocks out early or something later on or something stupid doesn't come back and say, oh, well, my last company let me do that. So set that up very early on. Then you're going to get granular, mapping out their roles and responsibilities and set up some scorecards. Then you're going to have trackable, again, keyword trackable, KPIs in a single source of truth. Again, manus.ai. Go set up an account. It's incredibly affordable. Otherwise, you're probably not going to get it done, and then this whole thing's not going to work. Then the feedback loop. You've got the trackable KPIs in the dashboard. You're going to check in with them. You're going to be very blunt and direct with them, and they're going to understand why that's in their best interest to help them succeed. You're going to genuinely give many F's about them. I actually dropped an F-bomb earlier, so hopefully that doesn't penalize me. Then do this consistently, and then you're going to do continuous coaching and development. They're going to have a growth plan. Everyone's expectations are set appropriately. You're going to do consistent coaching, and you're going to invest in upskilling them and helping them grow. And then you're going to have this whole thing tied to a lot of really juicy incentives so that they show up every day knowing this is a life-changing opportunity for them. All right, so there you have it. Those are the 7 pillars that I learned personally over many, many years of pain and frustration and banging my head against the wall until I finally learned the lesson. So hopefully you can learn a lot quicker than I did from this simple video right here and implement it in your business immediately. If you're watching this and you're thinking, God, I wish I could just find some great people to apply these 7 pillars to, well, that's exactly what myself and my company do. We have a virtual assistant agency where we can go out and find you the absolute best talent for any role within your business, assuming it's not something that requires them to be there in person, for about 80 to 90% less than you would pay in the US. We source talent from Latin America, the Philippines, South Africa, and Egypt. Just click the link in the description if you'd like to book a call and get some help with that. Or if you're someone that would like to start your own virtual assistant agency, there's also a link in the description for you as well. I have a community where you can work one-on-one with me, and I'll help you start your own VA agency completely from scratch. You don't need any experience. It doesn't even cost any money to start the business other than what you're going to be paying for the community. And you can do it all completely from home and eventually build it to the point like me where you don't do any work day to day because you've automated and systematized the entire thing. To recap, we can either help you hire A-player virtual assistants for 90% less than a US hire, or I can help you start your own VA agency. Both links are in the description. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next video.